All right, good morning. It took me a minute. Hopefully everybody's good here. Let me check. Rumble's usually where we're going to have trouble if we're going to have it somewhere. Let's see if we're live here. All right, we're doing great. Um, I never can tell how the light is. It looks okay in the one screen and then kind of crappy in the other. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, good morning. Good morning. Happy book club day. I am working with a new streaming app called EV Mux, and it gives a lot more options. It lets me not have to have as many screens open. If I could find my chat, that would be. Where is the chat? It shows me who's watching. You are live. Watch on YouTube. Okay, I don't know how to find the chat. Um. All right. Well, let me open another window up here, and until I can get it out, we'll just have to keep YouTube open so I can see what those folks are saying. I'm hoping it'll pop. Oh, wait, there it is. No, that's not it either. Comments. It is. StreamYard, OBS is absolute pure hell, 100%. It just good luck figuring it out. I've spent almost 80 hours trying to figure out OBS and gotten nowhere. And so I just happened to see this video on EV Mux, and I'd never heard of it. And so I looked at it, and so I was paying $50 a month to use StreamYard and had no options at all. And, I'm switching, you guys watch Fridays. I'm switching between scenes. I'm trying to find which screen I'm trying to share. Well, EV Mux is half the price. So if any of you podcast, it's half the price, and you can set up all of your scenes ahead of your show so that you can operate your entire show out of one screen. I'm going to have to go in and connect my chats because I don't think they're going to show up. But anyway, if you're watching on YouTube, I can't see your chat. So give me a minute here and let me get you set up. Facebook, I don't know if I'll be able to see yours at all. And I don't know how to do that for sure. So let me open another window here. Sorry, guys. I hate having tech problems at the beginning. All right, well, I'm not going to figure that out. So if you're commenting on YouTube, come over to Rumble because I can't see your comments. I'll get that fixed before Friday for sure. But anyway, welcome. And I hope your week is going okay. I know it's early in the week. Good morning, Miss Debbie. Good morning, Patty. Good morning, Coffinry. Good morning to everyone. And so I had just been praying about you guys. I pray about you all the time. And I wanted to do something that was a little bit lighter because the news is really heavy and people are stressed out. And sometimes you just need a little escapism, don't you? Good morning, Kay. Kay, you came over from YouTube, didn't you? Kay, if you have YouTube, or does somebody have YouTube? If you guys go over there and just leave a little comment in the chat for me that tells other people to come over to Rumble and maybe drop this link for them, because I can't see anybody's chat except for Rumble. Unless nobody's commented over there. If you're watching from Facebook or YouTube, pop up a comment so I can see if it comes up in the chat. It says all, so it looks like only the author page in the YouTube channel are going to appear. I'll have to go in and fix those settings. So good morning, good morning. I can only see chats. Hold on, let me type that in. So we're reading The Velveteen Rabbit. This is one of my favorite books because there are so many. Can you hear me now, Debbie? This is one of my favorite books because there are so many beautiful life lessons in it. And, I've said many times that the mark of excellent children's literature is that it's beloved by adults as well. And The Velveteen Rabbit is just hands down one of everybody's favorites. And you guys let me know if this sounds weird, or if you're having trouble hearing. I think it's okay though. just because it is one of those things that brings back the happy times from our childhood. And I think with everything that's going on, that's important. So I've got the book here. Okay, all right, awesome. I can see your chat. That's so cool. The Rumble chats don't pop up, so I still have to keep a Rumble screen open, but at least that's only 2 screens. I've had to have like 5 different windows open in the past. So this is it. Just beautiful literature. I bought I think this is like an anniversary edition. I can't remember off Rumble, but I got it, or Rumble, off Amazon, but I got it super cheap. If my grandchildren are watching, good morning, Atlas. Good morning, Sophie. And whoever might be watching with you, Laura, my daughter. If you're not watching now, I'm sure you'll be watching later when you get back from the library. But I just wanted to say hello to my grandchildren. Hi, guys. I love you. No one is here. Okay, that's okay. Most of my viewers come in through Rumble generally. But anyway, let's get started with the book. And I think I've got it where I can read it all off the screen and don't have to mess with flipping pages. The Velveteen Rabbit, or How Toys Become Real, by Marjorie Williams, with illustrations by William Nicholson. Let's see if I can make that a bigger screen. There we go. The Velveteen Rabbit, or How Toys Become Real. There was once a Velveteen Rabbit, and in the beginning he was really splendid. He was fat and bunchy as a rabbit should be. His coat was spotted brown and white. He had real thread whiskers, and his ears were lined with pink sateen. On Christmas morning, when he sat wedged in the top of the boy's stocking with a sprig of holly between his paws, the effect was charming. There were other things in the stocking, nuts and oranges and a toy engine and chocolate almonds and a clockwork mouse, but the rabbit was quite the best of all. For at least 2 hours the boy loved him. And then aunts and uncles came to dinner, and there was a great rustling of tissue paper and unwrapping of parcels. And in the excitement of looking at all the new presents, the Velveteen Rabbit was forgotten. For a long time he lived in the toy cupboard or on the nursery floor, and no one thought very much about it. He was naturally shy, and being only made of velveteen, some of the more expensive toys quite snubbed him. The mechanical toys were very superior and looked down upon everyone else. They were full of modern ideas and pretended they were real. The model boat, who had lived through 2 seasons and lost most of his paint, caught the tone from them and never missed an opportunity of referring to his rigging in technical terms. The rabbit could not claim to be a model of anything, for he didn't know that real rabbits existed. He thought they were all stuffed with sawdust like himself, and he understood that sawdust was quite out of date and should never be mentioned in modern circles. Even Timothy, the jointed wooden lion, who was made by the disabled soldiers and should have had broader views, put on airs and pretended he was connected with government. Between them all, the poor little rabbit was made to feel himself very insignificant and commonplace, and the only person who was kind to him at all was the Skin Horse. The Skin Horse had lived longer in the nursery than any of the others. He was so old that his brown coat was bald in patches and showed the seams underneath, and most of the hairs in his tail had been plucked out to string bead necklaces. He was wise, for he had seen a long succession of mechanical toys arrive to boast and swagger, and by break their mainsprings and pass away. And he knew they were only toys and would never turn into anything else. For nursery magic is very strange and wonderful, and only those playthings that are old and wise and experienced, like the Skin Horse, understand all about it. "What is real?" asked the rabbit one day, when they were lying down side by side near the nursery fender before Nana came to tidy the room. Does it mean having things that buzz inside you and stick out and a stick out handle? Real isn't how you're made, said the skin horse. It's a thing that happens to you when a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you. Then you become real. Does it hurt? Asked the rabbit. Sometimes, said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. When you are real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once, like being wound up? He asked, or bit by bit? It doesn't happen all at once, said the skin horse. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easily or have sharp edges or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you're real, most of your hair has been loved off. And your eyes drop out and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all because once you are real, you can't be ugly except to people who don't understand. I suppose you are real, said the rabbit, and then he wished he had not said it, for he thought the skin horse might be sensitive. But the skin horse only smiled. The boy's uncle made me real, he said. That was a great many years ago, but once you are real, you can't become unreal again. It lasts for always. The rabbit sighed. He thought it would be a long time before this magic called real happened to him. He longed to become real, to know what it felt like. And yet the idea of growing shabby and losing his eyes and whiskers was rather sad. He wished that he could become it without these uncomfortable things happening to him. There was a person called Nana who ruled the nursery. Sometimes she took no notion of the playthings lying about, and sometimes, for no reason whatever, she went swooping about like a great wind and hustled them away in the cupboards. She called this tidying up, and the playthings all hated it, especially the tin ones. The rabbit didn't mind it so much, for wherever he was thrown, he came down soft. One evening, when the boy was going to bed, he couldn't find the china dog that always slept with him. Nana was in a hurry, and it was too much trouble to hunt for china dogs at bedtime, so she simply looked about her, and seeing that the toy cupboard door stood open, she made a swoop. "Here," she said, "take your old bunny. He'll do to sleep with you." And she dragged the rabbit out by one ear and put him into the boy's arms. That night, and for many nights after, the Velveteen Rabbit slept in the boy's bed. At first he found it rather uncomfortable, for the boy hugged him very tight, and sometimes he rolled over on him, and sometimes he pushed him so far underneath the pillow that the rabbit could scarcely breathe. And he missed, too, those long moonlight hours in the nursery, when all the house was silent, and his talks with the skin horse. But very soon he grew to like it, for the boy used to talk to him and made nice tunnels for him under the bedclothes that he said were like burrows the real rabbits lived in. And they had splendid games together in whispers when Nana had gone away to her supper and left the nightlight burning on the mantelpiece. And when the boy dropped off to sleep, the rabbit would snuggle down close under his little warm chin and dream, with the boy's hands clasped close round him all night long. And so time went on, and the little rabbit was very happy. So happy that he never noticed how his beautiful velveteen fur was getting shabbier and shabbier, and his tail coming unsewn, and all the pink rubbed off his nose where the boy had kissed him. Spring came, and they had long days in the garden, for wherever the boy went, the rabbit went too. He had rides in the wheelbarrow and picnics on the grass and lovely fairy huts built for him under the raspberry canes behind the flower border. And once, when the boy was called away suddenly to go out to tea, the rabbit was left out on the lawn until long after dark, and Nana had to come and look for him with the candle because the boy couldn't go to sleep unless he was there. He was wet through with the dew and quite earthy from diving into the burrows the boy had made for him in the flower bed. And Nana grumbled as she rubbed him off with the corner of her apron. "You must have your bunny," she said. "Fancy, all that fuss for a toy." The boy sat up in bed and stretched out his hands. "Give me my bunny," he said. "You mustn't say that. He isn't a toy. He's real." When the little rabbit heard that, he was happy, for he knew that what the skin horse had said was true at last. The nursery magic had happened to him, and he was a toy no longer. He was real. The boy himself had said it. That night he was almost too happy to sleep, and so much love stirred in his little sawdust heart that it almost burst. And into his boot-button eyes that had long ago lost their polish, there came a look of wisdom and beauty, so that even Nana noticed it the next morning when she picked him up and said, "I declare if that old bunny hasn't got quite a knowing expression." That was a wonderful summer. Near the house where they lived there was a wood, and in the long June evenings the boy liked to go there after tea to play. He took the Velveteen Rabbit with him, and before he wandered off to pick flowers or play at brigands among the trees, he always made the rabbit a little nest somewhere among the bracken where he would be quite cozy. For he was a kind-hearted little boy, and he liked Bunny to be comfortable. One evening, while the rabbit was lying there alone, watching the ants that ran to and fro between his velvet paws in the grass, he saw two strange beings creep out of the tall bracken near him. They were rabbits like himself, but quite furry and brand new. They must have been very well made, for their seams didn't show at all, and they changed shape in a queer way when they moved. One minute they were long and thin, and the next minute fat and bunchy, instead of always staying the same like he did. Their feet padded softly on the ground, and they crept quite close to him, twitching their noses, while the rabbit stared hard to see which side the clockwork stuck out, for he knew that people who jumped generally have something to wind them up. But he couldn't see it. They were evidently a new kind of rabbit altogether. They stared at him, and the little rabbit stared back, and all the time their noses twitched. "Why don't you get up and play with us?" one of them asked. "I don't feel like it," said the rabbit, for he didn't want to explain that he had no clockwork. "Oh," said the furry rabbit, "it's as easy as anything." And he gave a big hop sideways and stood on his hind legs. "I don't believe you can," he said. "I can," said the little rabbit. "I can jump higher than anything." He meant when the boy threw him, but of course he didn't want to say so. "Can you hop on your hind legs?" asked the furry rabbit. That was a dreadful question, for the Velveteen Rabbit had no hind legs at all. The back of him was made all in one piece, like a pincushion. He sat still in the bracken and hoped that the other rabbits wouldn't notice. "I don't want to," he said again. But the wild rabbits have very sharp eyes, and this one stretched out his neck and looked. "He hasn't got any hind legs," he called out. "Fancy a rabbit without any hind legs!" And he began to laugh. "I have," cried the little rabbit. "I have got hind legs. I'm sitting on them." "Then stretch them out and show me, like this," said the wild rabbit, and he began to whirl round and dance till the little rabbit got quite dizzy. I don't like dancing," he said. "I'd rather sit still." But all the while he was longing to dance, for a funny new tickly feeling ran through him, and he felt he would give anything in the world to be able to jump about like these rabbits did. The strange rabbit stopped dancing and came quite close. He came so close this time that his long whiskers brushed the Velveteen Rabbit's ear, and then he wrinkled his nose suddenly and flattened his ears and jumped backwards. "He doesn't smell right," he exclaimed. "He isn't a rabbit at all. He isn't real." "I am real," said the little rabbit. "I am real. The boy said so." And he nearly began to cry. Just then there was a sound of footsteps, and the boy ran past near them, and with a stamp of feet and a flash of white tails, the two strange rabbits disappeared. "Come back and play with me," called the little rabbit. "Oh, do come back. I know I'm real." But there was no answer. Only the little ants ran to and fro, and the bracken swayed gently where the two strangers had passed. The Velveteen Rabbit was all alone. "Oh dear," he thought, "why did they run away like that? Why couldn't they stop and talk to me?" For a long time he lay very still, watching the bracken, and hoping that they would come back, but they never returned. And presently the sun sank lower, and the little white moths fluttered out, and the boy came and carried him home. Weeks passed, and the little rabbit grew very old and shabby, but the boy loved him just as much. He loved him so hard that he loved all his whiskers off, and the pink lining to his ears turned gray, and his brown spots faded. He even began to lose his shape, and he scarcely looked like a rabbit anymore, except to the boy. To him he was always beautiful, and that was all that the little rabbit cared about. He didn't mind how he looked to other people, because the nursery magic had made him real, and when you're real, shabbiness doesn't matter. And then, one day, the boy was ill. His face grew very flush, and he talked in his sleep, and his little body was so hot that it burned the rabbit when he held him close. Strange people came and went in the nursery, and a light burned all night, and through it all the little Velveteen Rabbit lay there, hidden from sight under the bedclothes, and he never stirred, for he was afraid that if they found him someone might take him away, and he knew that the boy needed him. It was a long, weary time, for the boy was too ill to play, and the little rabbit found it rather dull, with nothing to do all day long. But he snuggled down patiently and looked forward to the time when the boy should be well again, and they would go out in the garden amongst the flowers and the butterflies and play splendid games in the raspberry thicket like they used to. All sorts of delightful things he planned, and while the boy lay half asleep, he crept up close to the pillow and whispered them in his ear. And presently the fever turned, and the boy got better. He was able to sit up in bed and look at picture books, while the little rabbit cuddled close at his side, and one day they let him get up and dress. It was a bright, sunny morning, and the windows stood wide open. They had carried the boy out onto the balcony, wrapped in a shawl, and the little rabbit lay tangled up among the bedclothes, thinking. The boy was going to the seaside tomorrow. Everything was arranged, and now it only remained to carry out the doctor's orders. They talked about it all while the little rabbit lay under the bedclothes, with his head peeping out, and listened. The room was to be disinfected, and all the books and toys that the boy had played with in bed must be burnt. "Hurrah!" thought the little rabbit. "Tomorrow we shall go to the seaside." For the boy had often talked of the seaside, and he wanted very much to see the big waves coming in, and the tiny crabs, and the sand castles. I can't tell what page I'm on. Hold on. I went up too high. There we go. Just then, Nana caught sight of him. How about his old bunny?" she asked. "That," said the doctor. "Why, it's a mass of scarlet fever germs. Burn it at once. What nonsense. Get him a new one. He mustn't have that any more." And so the little rabbit was put into a sack with the old picture books and a lot of rubbish and carried out to the end of the garden behind the fowl house. That was a fine place to make a bonfire, only the gardener was too busy just then to attend to it. He had the potatoes to dig and green peas to gather, but next morning he promised to come quite early and burn the whole lot. That night the boy slept in a different bedroom, and he had a new bunny to sleep with him. It was a splendid bunny, all white plush with real glass eyes. But the boy was too excited to care very much about it, for tomorrow he was going to the seaside, and that in itself was such a wonderful thing that he could think of nothing else. And while the boy was asleep, dreaming of the seaside, the little rabbit lay among the old picture books in the corner behind the fowl house, and he felt very lonely. The sack had been left untied, and so by wriggling a bit he was able to get his head through the opening and look out. He was shivering a little, for he had always been used to sleeping in a proper bed, and by this time his coat had worn so thin and threadbare from hugging that it was no longer any protection to him. Near by he could see the thicket of raspberry canes, growing tall and close like a tropical jungle, in whose shadow he had played with the boy on bygone mornings. He thought of those long sunlit hours in the garden, how happy they were, and a great sadness came over him. He seemed to see them all pass before him, each more beautiful than the other, the fairy huts in the flower bed, the quiet evenings in the wood when he lay in the bracken, and the little ants ran over his paws. The wonderful day when he first knew that he was real. He thought of the skin horse, so wise and gentle, and all that he had told him. Of what use was it to be loved and lose one's beauty and become real if it all ended up like this? And a tear, a real tear, trickled down his little shabby velvet nose and fell to the ground. And then a strange thing happened, for where the tear had fallen, a flower grew out of the ground, a mysterious flower, not at all like any that grew in the garden. It had slender green leaves the color of emeralds, and in the center of the leaves a blossom like a golden cup. It was so beautiful that the little rabbit forgot to cry and just lay there watching it. And presently the blossom opened, and out of it there stepped a fairy. She was quite the loveliest fairy in the whole world. Her dress was of pearl and dewdrops, and there were flowers round her neck and in her hair, and her face was the most perfect flower of all. And she came close to the little rabbit and gathered him up in her arms and kissed him on his velveteen nose that was all damp from crying. "Little rabbit," she said, "don't you know who I am?" The rabbit looked up at her, and it seemed to him that he had seen her face before, but he couldn't think where. "I am the nursery magic fairy," she said. "I take care of all the playthings that the children have loved. When they are old and worn out and the children don't need them anymore, then I come and take them away with me and turn them into real." "Wasn't I real before?" asked the little rabbit. "You were real to the boy," the fairy said, "because he loved you. Now you shall be real to everyone." And she held the little rabbit close in her arms and flew with him into the wood. It was light now, for the moon had risen. All the forest was beautiful, and the fronds of the bracken shone like frosted silver. In the open glade between the tree trunks, the wild rabbits danced with their shadows on the velvet grass. But when they saw the fairy, they all stopped dancing and stood round in a ring to stare at her. "I've brought you a new playfellow," the fairy said. You must be very kind to him and teach him all he needs to know in Rabbitland, for he's going to live with you forever and ever." And she kissed the little rabbit again and put him down on the grass. "Run and play, little rabbit," she said. But the little rabbit sat quite still for a moment and never moved. For when he saw all the wild rabbits dancing around him, he suddenly remembered about his hind legs, and he didn't want them to see that he was made all in one piece. He didn't know that when the fairy that last time, she had changed him altogether. And he might have sat there a long time too shy to move if just then something hadn't tickled his nose. And before he thought what he was doing, he lifted his hind toe to scratch it. And he found that he actually had hind legs. Instead of dingy velveteen, he had brown fur, soft and shiny. His ears twitched by themselves, and his whiskers were so long that they brushed the grass. He gave one leap, and the joy of using those hind legs was so great that he went springing about the turf on them, jumping sideways and whirling round as the others did. And he grew so excited that when at last he did stop to look for the fairy, she had gone. He was a real rabbit at last, at home with the other rabbits. Autumn passed, and winter, and in the spring, when the days grew warm and sunny, the boy went out to play in the wood behind the house. And while he was playing, two rabbits crept out from the bracken and peeped at him. One of them was brown all over, but the other had strange markings under his fur, as though long ago he had been spotted, and the spots still showed through. And about his little soft nose and his round black eyes there was something familiar, so that the boy thought to himself, "Why, he looks just like my old bunny that was lost when I had scarlet fever." But he never knew that it really was his old bunny come back to look at the child who had first helped him to be real. Isn't that a great story? I thought you guys would love that. So let's talk a little bit about, and if I'm guessing the little ones might check out at this point, but let's talk a little bit about, let me find my comments here. There we go. Oh, let's read the comments. Mark says, "Dear Penny, I've listened to your interviews and short death story a few times. It was a joy listening to you. Thank you for sharing. Love your voice too, by the way." Thank you, Mark. That's very sweet. Love the part of how the energy of the thoughts had traveled to the other person, and that we have to be careful about what we think about someone, as it can help or hinder that person, and the importance of saying yes to life. Much love to you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. That's very sweet. Good morning, Michael. I hope you didn't miss the story. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, the book, and about how many life lessons there are in it. Interesting that the boy gets the bunny and immediately falls in love with it. And within a couple of hours, the bunny is forgotten. And I thought that about our lives. How often in our lives do we love something passionately just for a time and then forget about it? And I wonder why that is. Do you think that we get into a situation where we just decide we don't need that thing that we so loved before? I just wonder about that. People come and go from our lives, and hold on, I'm trying to fix my screen here so I can see this chat. Oh, wait a minute, I could pop the chat out if I can remember how to do it. Pop out. There we go. Now I can see. It's just interesting how people come and go from our lives, and how we can have such great affection for them, and then something happens and they just kind of drop off. And I know we've had that, and a lot of people have talked about how they've had division with family members and friends over the whole COVID thing and politics, and I could quite relate to the rabbit, feeling just so loved and excited, and then just as quickly forgotten. And I thought, how many people have expressed to me that they feel that way? And you guys have expressed to me that you've struggled with that, with division from family, over even unexpressed political views. And just so much hurt and animosity. And I wish that, that would be something that would pass soon. And then it talks about about Nana giving the rabbit back to the little boy, and the boy immediately embracing it. And I thought that's so nice, this idea, kind of a prodigal son kind of thing in the Bible, where um, in the story of the prodigal son, the son leaves and he goes away to um, you know just be a man, and do all the things that men do when they're young and they leave home, and he finally decides that home is where he belongs. And he goes back, and he's half expecting his father to be heard or to shun him or to have some kind of negative recourse because he left. But what does the father do? He opens his arms and he runs out to his son, and he prepares this huge meal, and he puts a ring on his son's finger to remind him that he's part of the family, and that his position isn't lost. And how special is that, that love of a parent, where no matter what our kids do, when they come back and they really want to be back and they want to be in relationship with us, how we just, we're able to let all of that go and love them and pull them back in. Just beautiful stuff there. And so the boy, meets the skin horse and has conversations with the skin horse about being real. And the bunny talks about all of the wind up toys that that think they're real, and they're fake. And they're very snotty about it, and they used a specific word, a way of talking about it. Um, it's back here. The mechanical toys were very superior and looked of modern ideas and pretended they were real. And then even the model boat is bragging about his rigging in very technical terms. And even Timothy, the jointed wooden lion, who was made by disabled soldiers and should have had broader views. And that is just exceptional writing in children's literature. That is written, also for the parents, clearly, that this jointed wooden lion, who had this very modest beginning at the disabled soldiers and should have had broader views and been more accepting, also puts on airs and pretends he's connected to the government. So he's completely engaged in a fantasy. I suppose it would be too far of a leap for that the lion to think that he was connected to the government since soldiers made him. But it's just a very comical sort of throw in of a almost political sort of thing. I thought that was very cute. But I love that the skin horse is wise and worn out, and was so loved by the boy's uncle that he was passed down to the little boy. And how sweet is that when we've got something special that that we hold on to and then pass down to somebody else that we love so that they can love that thing too. And the horse is just so wise in explaining about how you become real. And he talks about real isn't how you're made, said the skin horse. It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. Does it hurt? Asked the rabbit. Sometimes, said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. When you're real, you don't mind being hurt. And that's not true really for us, is it? It might be true for the toys in the nursery cupboard, but it's not true for us. When we're real, it hurts really bad to be hurt. We feel it very deeply, especially when it comes from someone that we love. But in the end, as long as that hurt's not too deep, we find a way to still love that person, don't we? And it's not always easy. And the rabbit asks, does it happen all at once, like being wound up, or bit by bit? And the horse says, it doesn't happen all at once. You become. It takes a long time. True that we don't become real all at once. We don't. It says I'm having internet trouble. I don't know what's going on. Hopefully you guys can see me okay. I'm still having trouble with my Rumble not, hold on, pop in chat. Let me see if I can, I'm not getting any comments on Rumble. I'm going to read. Oh, you guys are just quiet. Okay. Um, anyway, how long the process is to becoming, I'm thinking of a different term, like self-actualized, where you know who you are, you know your life, you've figured out your purpose. That takes a really long time. I mean, I know people my age who are still struggling. Don's still struggling. He feels like um, he's kind of a square peg around. Some people seem so self-assured. They know what they're doing. They've come out in life, and they just seem to know exactly what their path is, and they're walking it and working it out, and things are happening for them. And then there's other people, who still, hi Michael, there's other people who still struggle and are still unsure, and still feel kind of like life's happening to them. And I have to think that at some point, they'll become self-actualized too, and they'll become more confident in who they are as we get older. Look at your grandparents or your parents if they're older, how much different they are from when they were young. And for a lot of people, I find that they're slower to anger, and they're more patient, and they aren't as triggered by things. That's part of youth, just kind of being keyed up and having that right on your surface. But as you get older, you're kind of able to just let that stuff wash off you. Debbie says, I suspect all things, animate or not, have a life and sense of consciousness, perhaps different from what we experience. I think so too, Debbie. That's such a smart point. Like, we're all, for everything that is alive, plants, people, animals, we're all interconnected in this web of life, and we all, um, everything we do affects the other somehow, whether you see it or realize it or not. And I talk about that in my near-death experience, how um, even the things that you think about other people have an impact on them. And part of that is because if you're thinking negatively about someone, whether you realize it or not, it does impact how you act around them and how you interact with them. You interact differently with somebody that you don't like, or you're feeling critical of, or you have disgust for, whatever the situation is, or you're angry with, than you do towards somebody that you admire and love. And that's just the case, and we have friends and people in our lives that are easier to love than others. Some people just make it a real exercise, and other people just, like our kids. Our kids can be hard to love too at times, because they can be frustrating, of course. Um, but there's that love. And Don and I always have this conversation where he'll say to me, um, I love you, Penny. And I'll say, I love you, Don. And he'll say, and I like you. And that's it. It's, love is a commitment. Love is something that you do even when you don't like the person, even when the person's being unlikable. Um, so loving someone, we love our kids. You've got a screaming baby, and that baby is on your last nerve, but you love that baby so that you still care for it. You might not like that baby in that moment. The baby's being very unlikable, but you still love them because you're a parent. Um, being in a relationship, outside of your children, where you actually like the person that you're in that relationship, is so meaningful, because then it's a joy to give to them, and it's not an exercise. It's something that just pours out of you. And I also wanted to mention that, we can pour so much into other people that we get empty. And so the way to avoid that is to be um, having God pour into you, because God's energy for love and empathy and understanding and um, caring for other people is endless. And so if you're feeling drained, first look and make sure that you've not just completely overcommitted yourself, and you're not trying to be Superman or Superwoman. Um, and then, once you've made your schedule more appropriate, and you've looked at your life and thought, what is the most important, and how can I focus on that? And how can I limit the extraneous things that are stealing from my time. Don and I are really working on spending. Debbie and John Bender are good examples of this. Debbie's in our chat. Debbie and John like to go and explore the state that they live in. And so they go to little antique shops in different towns, and they go and experience all these little towns. Well, Don and I had gotten where he's so tired from his job, we'd kind of gotten in this habit on the weekends of just vegging the whole weekend and just watching TV. And we're making a concerted effort to get away from that, because that doesn't build intimacy or relationship. And so, for example, on Saturday, I made us breakfast and I set us up on the front porch. And we sat out there and just ate our breakfast, and I drank my coffee and we talked, and then I asked him to get his guitar out, and he played his guitar, and he brought his little song sheets out, and we worked on a song together, and I gave him some input of how to change a part of one of the songs, and he loved it. And it just built something in us, this desire to work together. So this song that you hear at the beginning, let me play this for you. Don composed it with my help. And produced it and everything. He did all the production and everything. I just was like, hey, we should add a clarinet here, or instead of going up here, can you go down? And this was born out of the time that we spent together on Saturday. So on Sunday, I was talking about book club and that I was going to read this. And later on, Don said, hey, I made this thing. And when he originally made it, it was just the kind of the Gregorian and the strings. And then I came up with the idea to add a flute, and that didn't quite work. And I said, well, let's add a clarinet. I'm going to play this for you guys. Isn't that pretty? And so he just made it for fun. He just had the voice you hear in the background, that kind of humming, and the harp sound. I think there might be some little string sounds in there. But anyway, he was just making that for fun. And so then I told him to add the clarinet, and I gave him this scene, and I said, I want you to think about this scene in your mind. There's this teenage-ish girl. We're kind of in a fairy tale sort of movie, and she's coming out of wherever she was, and there's this like wall of ivy, and she parts the ivy and she comes through it, and she's kind of trepidatiously walking into this this new land. And so she's a little nervous, but then she's kind of joyful, and she sees the beauty of it. And so that really helped him kind of come up with that clarinet part, because he had a visual for it. And we're just learning that we work together well in this way. I'm not, I don't sing well or anything like that, but I do have some gifts for composition. And so it was just interesting, and it was nice to work that out. Well, then he told me he was naming the song The Spring Princess. And I'm like, oh, that's just perfect. It's so beautiful, Don. Good job. And then I asked him, I said, would it be okay if I use that as my opening for the Velveteen Rabbit? Because it just goes perfectly with the book. It's magical and dreamy and hopeful. And I just love it. I love it. It's so cool that we did that together. And that came out of, the day before, us just spending some pointed time together on the porch and focusing on each other. And so I want to encourage you to do that in your relationships. Nice job on the music. Thank you, Coffin. Kay says, lovely lullaby. Goes perfectly with the Velveteen Rabbit. It really does. I'm hoping that that we'll be able to expand that a little bit, because it would be fun to add on to that. And he's got all that music stuff. This is why we're building a studio, because he has all this production equipment, and we can do this sort of stuff. And it would be really fun to do that together. And so anyway, that was that part. But I love that part about being real and how it does hurt and that it doesn't happen all at once, that you become. And I want you guys to just give some time this week to thinking about what you're becoming. It's easy to get older. I mean, it's throughout any stage of your life, it's easy to get in that rut where you're just kind of going through the motions every day and you're not growing, you're not changing, you're not becoming something more. And I did a talk for a friend of mine who's a financial consultant in Florida on my near-death experience. Only financial consultants that's ever reached out to me to ask me to talk. But he has a group of older people that follow his YouTube channel, and he was noticing that when people were retiring, they just quit living. They sat around, they watched TV, they didn't try to build relationships or learn new things, and so the focus of my talk was on that. Um and so I want us all, me too, to give some thought to becoming. And what is it you want to become? Have you thought about it? When we first started doing tea times, those videos, we talked about writing our own eulogies. And I know it seems depressing, but it's important to think about how you want to be remembered, because in order to be remembered that way, you have to live that way, right? And it's really helpful for making your decisions. And so when I wrote my eulogy, um, I wrote that what I would want someone to say about me was that, um, that Penny was just so filled with light and love, and that when you were around her, that light, it couldn't help but spill out of her and get on you. And somehow you knew you could be more and you wanted to be more. And when you walked away from that interaction with Penny, you were more. And so I try to, in my interactions with you and in my interactions with family and others, I'm trying to get back to that, because, with COVID and everything, everything was so overwhelming. I got away from conducting myself in a way that would lead to that end. And we all do. We get off track and we have to walk back. And so I'm really working on that, on trying to focus on people more. We had the grandkids recently, and had all four of them, and I really wanted to have them, for that time. And so we picked them up and we kept them longer than we had originally decided, that we were going to. Um, because I just wanted to experience them. I wanted to watch them play and slide down that hill at the park and climb on the dulcimer climber and watch little Sophia play in the creek and splash in the waterfall and wash the rocks and make rock soup for me. What did she tell me she was making me? Ubuchi. I said, "What are you making?" And she said, "I'm making you ubuchi." I have no idea what ubuchi is, but what a delightful thing, that she's in the creek, and what is she thinking of? Making something for me. And I just think that's very sweet, that innocence of children, um, that they just love like that. And so I just thought that was a really poignant part of the story. He also says it takes a long time. That's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easily or have sharp edges or who have to be carefully kept. Kind of the people that you have to, when you're around them, it's like walking on eggshells. And we all know people like that. People that have sharp edges, people that are bristly. Um, it's harder for them to become because of that sort of temperament. And that's something that they have to work harder on. And it's harder for us to help them become because they're so prickly. And the part where he talks about, you get shabby you get loose in the joints and your eyes drop out. Um, but these things don't matter at all, because once you're real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. Isn't that beautiful? I just I just thought that was beautiful. As we get older, I think I'm trying to not be critical of how I'm aging. And And I'm trying to, it was funny. I got into a conversation with somebody on Twitter. And if your kids are listening, this is probably not the part to have them listen to, but I got into this conversation with somebody on Twitter, and I can't remember if it was a conversation of how it started. It was about breastfeeding, and I said, I said these girls aren't girls that you'd want to see unclothed out in the streets, because they were talking about people being um, displaying nudity in the month of June. And I said, these were real working, working girls, and you wouldn't want to see them out. And and it's so funny because, they're different before you nurse those babies, and then they change. And it's hard as a woman to not look at your body critically after you've had children, and to realize that you have lived a life and used your body in service of your children. And I thought, you know, I'm going to try to remember that. I'm going to try to remember that these gray hairs and, these little wrinkles and stuff were hard won, and that it's okay, and it doesn't make you not beautiful. Debbie says, I always thought that part was the best passage in the book. I love that part. It's just so, we could talk about this book probably for a month and still not hit every point. So the boy is wanting to be real. He doesn't, or the rabbit is wanting to be real. He doesn't want all of those things to happen to him. And isn't that so true? You want to be more like this or more like that person, but we don't want to endure the suffering and the work that it's going to take to become that. And so we don't become. We stay right where we are. We stay stuck. It happens with health a lot. We put on weight, or we have a health issue, and then we just decide that that's our fate. That's where we're going to be, and 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 we stop trying to become, and we just accept those things about ourselves. We accept the things that the doctor tells us about ourselves, or that the psychiatrist tells us about ourselves, or that the pastor tells us about ourselves, or that other people tell us, instead of remembering that we're becoming, and not accepting those things that are imposed on us, and continuing to walk that walk, and to become, and to work through those things, especially things like if you're seeing a lot of cycles in your life where the same sort of thing keeps happening to you. That's something you need to work through. Instead of just enduring it, you need to figure out why that keeps reoccurring in your life. What are you doing that's bringing it to pass? And what can you do, and how can you grow and react differently the next time it comes around, so that cycle is broken? And that's really important, because otherwise you become this person who lives under the idea that everything happens to you and you have no control. We've talked about this. There's an internal locus of control and an external locus of control. An external locus of control has a person believing that everything happens to them. An internal locus of control is, I am controlling the things that happen in my life. And yes, some bad situations might come my way, but ultimately I'm in control, and I can become a better person through this, and have this not become a cyclical thing in my life. And if it is a cyclical thing, I can figure out how to break it. And it's really important, because otherwise you just go round and round in life, and you don't feel like you're gaining any ground, because you're not. Debbie says, now I'm old and I like that passage even more. Me too. I trust the skin horse escaped the burn pit and went on to be a beautiful horse like the Clydesdales near my home. Oh yeah, I hope so. It's funny, because when they're talking about when the rabbit reflects on being in the bag, or when the narrator does, he's just in the bag with a bunch of books, or the books are the only thing they mentioned. And I wondered about the skin horse too. And it would be interesting to have a follow-up where the skin horse has become a beautiful horse, and the rabbit and he interact. That would be a great second life for this book. And then they talk about Nana and the little boy getting sick. And I thought it was so sweet how the bunny, the boy's fever was so high that the that it hurt the bunny to lay next to him, but the bunny wanted to stay there anyway because the boy needed him. And I thought, how often in our lives have we endured suffering um, to to be of service to someone else? We do it with our kids all the time. How many times did you drag out of bed, every hour during the night because you had a sick baby or a fussy baby, or did you walk the floors with your baby? Um, or you've got a little one, a kid of any age that's struggling. You've got a teenager that's going through something, and you're up at night and you're praying over that child, and that one gets me. I've done that a lot. Going through divorce and and I know a lot of us have gone through it, and seeing how that affects your kids, and it's just brutal. It's heart-wrenching. You'd so much rather, you know, take a hammer to your hand yourself than have any suffering fall on your kids. And I just remembered all of the time I spent in my head worrying about my kids and praying about my kids and resenting my ex-husband for abandoning them, and it's some and holding, feeling guilty myself for making a decision that would, to marry somebody that would land my children in that place. Why didn't I do better? Why wasn't I more discerning? Why didn't I, make a better choice in a mate? But, ultimately I finally came to the point that I thought to myself, had it not been for my choice of that mate, I wouldn't have these specific children. And how horrible would that be? These specific children are incredible, you know? And so I just think there's a lot of that, um, of giving when it hurts because you love that person so much. Um, then when the boy makes him real, fusses at Nana for saying that he's a toy, and saying, "No, that's my bunny. He's real. He's not a toy." And that taking up for someone, we talk a lot about my brother on here and the fights that I've been in standing up for my brother. And that I felt that in that moment where the boy's like, "No, he's not a toy. He's real." And I remember saying, "No, he's not a stupid retard. He's not your whipping post, or he's real. He's a person. He has feelings. Um, how dare you treat him like that?" And I felt that boy's anger in that moment at Nana, um, for her unjustly, calling the bunny a toy. And it's funny because Nana seems to fail to understand, and I'm guessing that she's a nanny. Um, she fails to understand the love that children develop for toys and things. My grandkids, both my daughter's two kids, both have blankets that they've had since they were newborns that they love. They have to have them to sleep with every night. And when we had them here, we slept out here in the camper to camp out, because kids love stuff like that. So do we. And we took the table down, and that makes a bed. And the first funny thing was Sophia, the 4-year-old, says, I'm getting everybody set to, where they're going to go and who's going to sleep where. And Sophia says the grandkids all call my husband Buddy, instead of Grandpa, because when Cole, my oldest grandson, was little, Don always called him Buddy. "Come on, Buddy, let's go do this or let's go do that." And so Cole started calling him Buddy, and then it just took, and so that's what all the grandkids call him. But Sophia is getting ready for bed, and Sophia and Nora are going to sleep here, and the boys are sleeping off this way. And Sophia says, "Okay, who gets to sleep with Buddy?" And I said, "I do." And she says, "That's not fair. You always get to sleep with Buddy." And I just thought that was funny. She's like, "We're having this big sleepover," and she wanted to snuggle with Buddy, but I still got to sleep with Buddy, and we put the girls over here. Um, but anyway, it was just fun to have them and spend that time with them. I can't remember where I was going with that one. So they take him out. Oh, and he gets left, right? So he's outside playing with him, and the boys made him real, and they're having all of this fun together. And just think of those relationships that you've had where you think back on them, or times in your life when you were a teenager or whenever it was for you, where you felt so alive. I'll hear a song every once in a while or smell something, and it'll take me right back. And back to my teenage years when we were cruising up and down Main Street and doing goofy things as a kid, and your mind will pull back these memories that that you didn't even remember until they came back, and you're like, oh wow, I'd completely forgotten about that magical thing or that time in our lives. And my kids will tell stories sometimes about things that I've long since forgotten, and I'm like, oh man, that's crazy. I'd totally forgotten about that. But the boy and the bunny are having that season of their life together where it's magical, and all they want is to be around each other. And like when you first are in a relationship, that what's that word? It's not love. Oh, I almost had it. Where you're kind of enamored with the person. It's not love yet. It's that initial attraction, and I cannot think of the word. And that wears off, and that's when a lot of people divorce, because infatuation, infatuation that, oh, there he is, or there she is, and you just can't wait for that person to call. You can't wait to see that person. As soon as they walk into the room, you light up. A lot of people think that when that goes away, that you're not in love anymore. And I'm like, no, that was infatuation. Love is the commitment that you make to that person that carries you through when the person is a complete pain in the butt. So they're in this infatuation stage of their life, and they're building relationship to the point where there is, very much love between the two. Kay says, when I went away to college several states away, my mom sent me a small throw pillow stuffed with my blankie from my childhood. What does a blankie turn into by the nursery fairy? What does a blankie turn into by the nursery fairy? I guess it was a pillow for me. Oh, that's very sweet. Yeah, Michael makes a good point that there's lust in that first, when you first meet somebody and you're attracted to them, and you get in, then you get into relationship with them, and you're imagining your life forward with them, and it's interesting how those sorts of relationships build, as opposed to relationships with our kids where it's all self-sacrifice from day one, until they start getting a little bit older and can give back some. And he even recounts how happy he is that the boy said he's real, and that it changed him. It changed his countenance so much that even Nana noticed the next day. Nana says, I declare if that old bunny hasn't got quite a knowing expression. She even saw the change in him because the boy loved him and made him real, and that's what love does. Even when you're pouring into somebody, when your kids are in their teen years and they don't necessarily appreciate that, these things that you're doing for them, these things, restrictions that you're putting on them and guidelines that you're giving them are out of love. We get so worried once they start gaining some independence that we worry that something's going to happen to them because there's so much more trouble that they can get into. And so, we're giving them these guidelines, and we're saying no because of our love for them and our desire that they'd be safe and not hurt. And, then they're pushing back against it because they're trying to differentiate who they are as a person apart from you. And that hurts. It's hurtful as a parent, and they're not trying to hurt you. Well, sometimes they are. They'll fuss or argue or say things just to establish their own individuality. And as adults, we have to learn how to take that and not internalize it too much, and understand that they're just trying to define their own boundaries, and try to help them to do that in a way that's not hurtful to others. Then they talk about the other rabbits coming up. And immediately I got the sense that the bunny was incredibly self-conscious and felt like he had a secret. He had that secret that he wasn't really a real, he may have been real to the boy, but he wasn't real like they were. And, we all have that where, um, we feel so outdone or outclassed by somebody that as soon as they walk in, you feel like, oh, geez, I'm not near where they are. And it's never true. We always think that everybody else has it so much more together than we do, when the fact is that we all have some kind of mess that we're dealing with. And this bunny is immediately you kind of feel him in his soul and his spirit tense up because he doesn't want these other bunnies to know the truth about him. And how often do we do that? Do we forsake authenticity um, because we think the truth of who we are might cause someone to reject us? Debbie says, love recognition of worth and praise. Even our pets respond and are changed. Yes. Our youngest cat announces he's caught a toy mouse at 2 to 4 a.m. We wake up and praise the great and mighty hunter Babu. I remember when you guys found Babu, just a little stray cat out somewhere. Weren't you guys out touring like you do some little town, and you found Babu and he looked a hot mess. And um, here you guys have had him for all these years. I can't remember how long ago that's been. We've been friends for a while. Um, and just the love that you guys gave him and taking him in and, taking care of him and meeting his physical needs and his needs for, family, how much that changed Babu and made Babu who he is today. We have that with our cats too. They're all rescues, and it's interesting to watch their personalities develop. It happens with our kids too. You have them and you have all these ideas about who they're going to be and who you want them to be, and they're their own people. It's amazing to me how different my kids are from the silly ideas that I had about who they'd be and how they'd be. And it's so much better. It's so much better than what I had imagined. Branson, Missouri, on the side of a highway. He's 3 now. Yeah. And I was trying to remember. Debbie, I knew you before I got COVID, right? I think I did. I'm pretty sure I did. I could be totally wrong though. I'm pretty sure I did. Um, so the bunnies come and, they challenge him, and then when they realize he can't do the things that they can do, then they become suspicious, and then they point out he doesn't have hind legs, and that is really something that's difficult for the bunny. Um, he wasn't even going to get out of the seated position because he didn't want them to know that he had this disability of having this lack of hind legs. And then they smell him and they realize that something's different. This isn't what a live bunny smells like. And they're fearful of him and they run away. And if you've ever had anybody notice something about you and reject you for it, something that you don't have any control over, or treat you differently because of it. And that's something that I really noticed because, we moved around a lot and I was the new kid, and and then the issues with my brother and how people treated him. So I could totally relate to the bunny there. Since 2015, before Don and I were married. Wow. Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? But interestingly, he wanted that community with the bunnies. He wanted to be, it's like when kids are trying to find their peer group. You want to be a part of this group, but it's not up to you. It's up to the group to accept you. And then when the group doesn't, it's so painful. And the bunny goes through that. And then the little boy gets sick, and the bunny's sent out to the back of the fowl house to be burned, and the fairy comes. And it was funny because the fairy was familiar to him. And I thought that was interesting because I don't remember the fairy in any other part of the story, like why she would be familiar. Um, then a strange thing happened, for where the tear fell, a flower grew out of the ground, a mysterious flower, not at all like any that grew in the garden. It had slender green leaves, the color of emeralds, and in the center of the leaves, a blossom like a golden cup. It was so beautiful that the little rabbit forgot to cry and just lay there watching it. I thought that was really important. How when you're feeling really bad about something, overwhelmed about the world, sad about the way the world is going, we can get stuck in that. And this is a good lesson for us. This beautiful thing, the bunny catches sight of this beautiful thing and he forgets to cry. Just think about that. I saw this beautiful thing. I was crying. I was so sad. And I saw this beautiful thing and I forgot to cry. We have to remember that. We have to remember that we need to look to beauty when we're really struggling. We need to look to God. Um, we need to be grateful to God, and we need to remember and say the things that we are grateful for, because that quiets the spirit. It quiets that sadness and that longing for the way things used to be. It's helpful. Um, look at things of beauty, go for a walk outside, experience nature, take your headphones out and really experience it and look at the things that are growing. Go take a drive somewhere in the country where you haven't been and park your car and go walk and just let that beauty restore your spirit, because it's hard. This is a hard life. And it can be a real challenge to not get down about it. Comedy is also really important. You know, I've been trying to make a point when I'm feeling angry or irritable or like, oh, why can't, the world just straighten up? I'm just so tired of all this nonsense. Um, I find that watching something comedic, we watched Office Space this weekend, and it really lightened me back up. It lightened Don back up, and I've been trying not to watch news around Don because he's really sensitive to it, and it really affects him. I can compartmentalize. He's not very good at that, and so I have to be careful what I subject him to. So I'm working on that. Um, but the fairy comes, and at one point, I'm sorry, that dog is barking. Um, Little rabbit, she says, don't you know who I am? The rabbit looked up at her, and it seemed to him that he had seen her face before, but he couldn't think where. I am the nursery magic fairy, she said. I take care of all the playthings that the children have loved. When they are old and worn out and the children don't need them anymore, then I come and take them away with me and turn them into real. And I thought, I don't remember I don't know if it's a plot hole, but I don't remember any time in this story. There's no time in this story where we ever hear of the fairy until this point. So the Velveteen Rabbit has a plot hole, just so you know. She tells him, he says, wasn't I real before? And she says, you were real to the boy, meaning the boy made this decision that you were real. And you believed what he said about you, what he thought about you, but you're actually not really real yet. Um, he says you were real to she says you were real to the boy because he loved you. Now you shall be real to everyone else. Who in your life, think of the people in your life who you're not real with, you're not your authentic self with. And it may be a self-protection sort of thing. Um, but you have to be careful because that can leak over into the other areas of your life. And then you're just kind of living with this mask on. You're going through the motions. People have this idea of who you are, but they don't really know who you are. And it's really scary to let people in. And so that's something that we have to work on. Now, of course, there are certain people that aren't safe to let in, and that's okay. That's part of our self-protection. But we can get where we treat everybody that way. And so we pretend like we're being authentic, but we don't share things that we're struggling with. If someone offers to help us, we're like, no, 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 I've got it. Um, Rather than being authentic and saying, you know what, I do need help. Could you help me? I really appreciate that you've offered to help me. Could you come over? But we never take them up on it. And what happens when you do that is we're so often denied the opportunity to bless someone because people don't want to accept that help, either because of pride or shame. Maybe their house is in a state that they wouldn't want anyone to see it. Ours is a wreck because we've been in the middle of this renovation forever. And so it's hard for me to say to someone, yes, bring over a casserole and have them in and talk to them, because I'm self-conscious about the house being a disaster. We're working on it, but it makes it more difficult for me to be my authentic self and to let people in. And I've been trying to express that to Don. We've got to get this done because I don't feel like I can let anybody in, because where would I have them over and even let them in emotionally, because there's this part of my life that's off limits because it's constant chaos. Maybe the fairy Debbie says, maybe the fairy is like, wait, Kate, let's go back. Kay says, at the end of the book, there are two bunnies that come out to see the boy. Is the brown one the same bunny that had formerly challenged the toy bunny? Oh, I wondered that too. Who is this bunny friend? They don't really make it clear who this bunny friend is that now the boy's bunny is coming out with. I wondered that too. Debbie says maybe the fairy is like angels or spiritual beings recognized as familiar in NDEs. That's true. Maybe the fairy represents God, and the reason the fairy is familiar to the bunny is the same reason God is familiar to us, that there seems to be something in us that is looking for God in some way. You know, people find it different ways, but there's that hole in us that's there on purpose um, to help us find God. And people fill that with all kinds of things and all sorts of things that have become religion. And religion is quite different than God. I'm talking about God, that personal relationship, that um, deep and abiding relationship that we have with the entity that created us. So that's a really good point, because we always have this idea of God, whether we believe in him or not, just because of our society. And I think not just because of our society. I think because, even if you took somebody out and they lived in the middle of nowhere, um, they would have that longing for that deeper spiritual connection. That's a really smart point. Um, Maybe the fairy is like angels or spiritual beings. Yeah, I think that's right. Isaac's mom says, it seems when I'm really missing my son, oh, the Lord distracts me with something I need to pray for or just give my attention to. Yeah. My aunt, we lost my cousin a couple years back and and she still, it every day she struggles with it, of course. And I think one of the mistakes people make when they're dealing with somebody who's lost a loved one is they don't bring it up. Not the death, but the loved one. And so everybody stops talking about that person, and that makes the loss even worse because you don't want to talk about it because you don't want to make people feel weird or uncomfortable and put them in a situation where they might not know what to say, and then the person doesn't ever mention that person for the same reasons, right? And we really do need to still talk about those loved ones that have gone on. Isaac's mom, I'm sure you do. um Kay says, I just made the connection that the nursery fairy is like when spirit comes for us at the end of our lives and makes us truly real. Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah. And the bunny is so much more. Um, the bunny is as the creator would have had him be. That's beautiful. I love that. Um, once God came for me and I was out of my body and off in the place with God, I felt I felt like I was home, and I was so homesick afterward. I felt completely accepted and loved, and that's just something that you can't feel on this side because people aren't capable of that. And I'm not saying people don't accept you and love you, but not the way God does, not the way you know, other people might love my kids, but they'll never love them like I love them just because they grew inside me and I birthed them and I raised them, and there is just this. I will I will always be, what's the word I'm looking for? Enamored. God is enamored with us. And that's, how we feel. Remember when you held your baby that first time, how enamored you were with them. I remember just looking at them and going in their room when they were sleeping just to look at them and marvel at this thing that I had created. I'm like, oh my gosh, look, they're just perfect. Um, so yeah, I think that's a really small. I just made the connection that the nursery fairy is like when spirit comes for us at the end of our lives and makes us truly real. Yeah, I didn't make that connection. Thank you for doing that for me. Um, yes, and then I want to scream out, Isaac was here. Oh, yes, Isaac was here. Um, Isaac lived a life that was important and valuable, and Isaac left too early. Um, Yeah, you don't want Isaac to be forgotten, and I think even though it brings some feeling of sadness to talk about him, is it any different really than the sadness of not talking about him and people not bringing him up? Which is worse, would you say? The fact that people don't bring him up because of fear of hurting you. Um, like my aunt, it's funny, I would tell my aunt a story, I'll text her and I'll say, "Hey, I was just thinking about the time," whatever it was, right? And she said to me one time, she's like, "Thank you for talking about him." And I think that's when I really realized it, that, when the person dies, the whole world treats it, often just because they don't know how to treat it. They treat it like that it's never talked about anymore. It never comes up, despite the fact that you desperately need to talk about it because Isaac still exists. Isaac's geography sucks. He's living in a place where you can't get your arms around him. But he still exists, and it probably, much like the whole world, has forgotten him. And maybe that's something in being authentic. We were talking about being authentic. Maybe that's something that you talk to some of your closer friends about. You I know you loved Isaac. Um, and I don't want to stop talking about him. I don't want to never talk about him because that makes it feel like, you know, and so maybe that's something you say, and maybe you start up some conversations. You say to somebody, "Do you remember that time Isaac did this or Isaac did that?" And when that conversation goes well, you say, "I really enjoyed this. It actually made me feel better. It made his loss feel less um, painful to me because we're still talking about him and remembering him." So if you guys have somebody in your life um, that's lost someone, don't be so concerned about the idea that bringing them up is going to set this person back. Bring up something happy. Remember that time, Isaac did this or Isaac did that, and laugh together and see how healing that is for the person. And yes, there might be some tears that come along with it because they miss it or because everybody has not talked about Isaac for so long, that talking about him brings back that pain of him being gone for them too, but that's okay too. That's part of healing. Kay says, "I didn't realize the Velveteen Rabbit was a story to teach kids about death and the afterlife. Our loved ones still check on us even." It's not a story to teach kids about death and the afterlife. We're just making correlations. You know how, as adults, it's a different analogy than it is for kids. We can say, "Wow, that's like when this happens," or "That's like when that happens." For kids, it's a story about love and about acceptance and dealing with peers, um, about being authentic and being real, about the fact that life does sometimes hurt, um, about a higher purpose, you know. And that's why I when I would read to my kids, I always tried to think of how there was broader meaning in the story than just the story. I mean, that's true with anything, isn't it? Um, if you think back on a memory that you really enjoy, um, think about why that gives you joy. It's because there's greater meaning to it than just the things that happened. And so, Kay, I think for us, we're drawing really high meaning from it. We're diving deep. How does this apply to us as adults? How does this apply to the world? We're able to do that on a much grander level than a child is. Um, but kids will come up with some pretty profound things too. Um, so yeah, that's not. I don't think that was the intention author that we're talking about how this is like when, like Isaac's mom losing Isaac, or the fairy is like God, that sort of thing. If you read any of oh, for Pete's sake, Lord of the Rings. What the heck? What is wrong with my brain? Lord of the Rings is very much symbolism of God and the fight of good and when you watch it and you're younger, it has a completely different meaning than when you go back and watch it with a bunch of life experience. You see those broader meanings. There's in The Witch in the Wardrobe. Um, when I was a little girl, that was just a magical story. Now that I look at it, I can see, that as is the lion's name's Aslan, right? Aslan is representative of Christ. And if you read some of the commentary on those, that was there's intention. It doesn't come through for a little one necessarily, but as we get older, we can really embrace that. I didn't. Isaac's mom says I realized early that people just don't know. Yeah, yeah. I always tell people, I'm like, please, when you're going to a funeral, you're going to see somebody who lost someone. Don't say God needed another angel. God is in need of nothing. Um, that's just one of the words that I hear. Um, there's other ones. It was just his time. Well, that just inspires helplessness. Um, I'm sad that Isaac is gone because Isaac was an incredible human being. But what can we learn from the life that he lived? And how can that make us better? How can we continue to honor Isaac by living in ways um, that he would want us to live in? He wouldn't want us to sit around and be sad all the time. He would want us to have joy and to have meaning and to keep his memory alive through. I had a lady reach out to me who had lost her son, and he loved her son-in-law. He'd fallen off a roof, and she held him, and as she waited for paramedics, and he died in her arms, and he was like her own son. And she'd lost her husband just before that, and that's why the son-in-law was on the roof, because he was doing roof work that needed done that her husband would have done had he been alive. And so she was really stuck, and she couldn't find any joy in life, and because her son-in-law was gone, and she loved him so dearly. And so I told her, I said, well, what did he love to do? And she said he loved to play guitar. And I said, well, here's an idea. Go somewhere um, where guitar instruction is done, and ask that instructor if they know of any child who's dropped out of guitar lessons because their parent couldn't afford it anymore, and then scholarship that child's guitar lessons and develop a relationship with that family. And in doing that, you're keeping your son-in-law's memory and his love of music alive. And that was just so helpful for her. um, Isaac's mom says, I do that with my siblings and my coworkers, and you're so right. It does happen. It does work. Then I feel the next opportunity, I easily talk about Isaac. Yes, the more you do it, the easier it is. I tell everyone on his birthday, today is Isaac's birthday. Yeah. Debbie says, the book is about all those things. That's what makes it a great book for kids and adults. Winnie the Pooh is like that. Oh, yes, Winnie the Pooh is just brilliant writing. A favorite of mine is little known Thorn Tree Meadows by Roger Nutt. Will you text that to me, Debbie, so I can look that one up because I'm needing some more children's literature? Isaac's mom says, my mother-in-law, God bless her soul, said life goes on. Ugh, that's harsh. That's like stop your grieving. Just get over it. I'm guessing she doesn't. I don't know. Maybe she does mean it that way, but that people just don't realize what they're saying, and like I said, it would be better just to acknowledge, or just to say, I don't know what to say about this. This is just so sad. I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you. That would be better than life goes on. God needed another angel. It was just his time. Um, you know, stuff book on like what to say when someone loses someone, because 90% of people just say things that make it worse, not meaning to. Isaac's mom says, yes, since age of 2, Isaac always made sure I was smiling and laughing. The name Isaac means, and God shall laugh. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that. I love that. Um, so I'm trying to think of what my kids' names mean. Isn't that crazy that my memory is really sketchy since all um, Laura means a crown of laurel leaves, and those, I think that has biblical significance if I recall correctly. Um, Hold on. Let me look. I got to know now. Biblical meaning of Laura. The name of Laura is not in the Bible. However, the tradition of placing laurel leaves on one's head as a sign of victory is ancient, and the original Latin word laurus shows up in the Bible. Um, the original meaning of victory and crowning is a concept almost as old. And then you've got David. That one's going to be loaded. Means beloved. David is a classic boy's name of Hebrew origin, meaning beloved and uncle. The biblical title was popularized by King David. And then we've got Jacob. I think my name means bobbin weaver. Jacob means to follow or be behind, but it can also mean to supplant, overreach, or come from the Hebrew word for heel. It can also may God or based on the biblical story of Jacob. Isaac means and God shall laugh. That's lovely. Oh, yeah, it does. Because that's the name of Abraham and Sarah have Isaac, right? And Isaac or Abraham, I think Sarah laughed when God said that she was going to, and she's like, how am I going to have a child at my age? Because they were quite old, and she laughed, and so that's why they named the baby Isaac. Yeah, it's fun, just brought that back. Um, Mother-in-law, God bless her. And Isaac was your only child, right? I feel like we've had this conversation. I talked so much. I had somebody message me last night, I guess. Well, I don't know when they messaged me. I finally got to it last night, about doing an interview. And, I tell you guys, I don't say interviews. Well, I said no. And not because I don't want to do interviews. I said no because my podcasting thing is going to have some changes. I don't want to, until it's all settled, I don't want to tell you guys, but I'm going to be taking on some new things, and we'll still do this, of course, and Friday nights. And I've set up a writing schedule so that I can finish the book. The goal is to finish the book by December 15th, the book that I'm writing. So I kind of had to step away. And part of the reason I'm stepping back from interviews is it makes more sense to do those interviews once the book is published, because then then people will have, you only get like an hour to talk in an interview, but then I'll be able to have a book to offer so that people can go and read more. Right after the doctor slapped his behind and he cried, because I wanted him, and Isaac laughed, and the doctor said they both laughed. That's how my father, who I asked to something, yes, he was. That's funny. I remember when David was born, everything kind of went badly, the C-section, and he wasn't breathing, and I was crashing, and it was bad. And I remember like this dreamy memory of, I kept saying, how much does he weigh? How much does he weigh? And nobody would answer me. And I remember seeing that he was just purple in that, in the little isolette, and they were, giving him oxygen. They were bagging him, trying to get him breathing. And I remember seeing his one foot sticking out of the isolette and saying, oh my gosh, his foot is huge. He had the biggest baby feet I'd ever seen. And then when Laura was born, and when she was born, I always unwrapped them because I wanted to look at them. And so I unwrapped her, got all of her clothes off, made sure everything was normal. Well, when I unwrapped her, her little legs went like this. And I thought, oh my gosh, what's wrong? My baby's broke. But she had some hip dysplasia from being a butt breech because their legs are up like that. So you have to keep them swaddled to relax all of the connections in the hips so that their legs will go back down. But I was really worried what that was going to mean for her in life. And then Jake was an emergency C-section after 52 hours of labor and a ruptured uterus. And then I, couldn't have any more after him. And he had colic. Oh my gosh. And I remember me and Laura and Jake would or me and Laura David, Laura, and I would all sit out on the front porch and we would cry because we couldn't take the crying anymore and nothing we did would console him. And this lady was walking down the street one day while we were and David said, "Can't we just take him back to the hospital?" And I said, "No, you once you take him home, you have to keep him. You can't return him." And this lady walked by and she said, "Oh my goodness, what's with all of these crying people?" And so I was like, "Our baby has colic. We just can't take it anymore." And he would start at 7:15 every night. You could set a clock by him, and he would scream for 2 hours no matter what you did. And so she said, "Oh, honey, go up to the health food store. They make this stuff called Bubble Be Gone, and it's just a little herbal supplement. It's got catnip and fennel and things like that for the nervous system." And she said, "Give that to him about a half an hour before he normally starts screaming," and we never had another incident. I never saw that lady again. Ah, that's interesting. Yeah, I never saw her again, and we sat out on the porch every evening. But yeah, it was just that one time. Maybe she was visiting, who knows? Um, yeah, he was your only child. I asked my father to name Isaac. I was a single mother. He was my only child. Oh, wow. Wow. That's tough. My sister-in-law lost um, her high school sweetheart and her son in the same car accident, and he was her only child, and she couldn't have any more. A miracle for sure. Yeah, yeah. All right, guys, it's 12:15. I'm gonna pray us out. Um, I did reach out to Dear, the 9/11 guy, and I think let me make sure we're set for the 20. I got to do some promo videos for that, but let me make sure on the date here. Yes. Uh, he sent me his head. That works for me. Acquisition ahead of time. Okay, yeah. So David Chandler is the that's going to come on, and we're going to talk about Building 7 of 9/11, and that'll just be just a really interesting deep dive for sure. Um, so he's coming on. I think videos I did posted the other day because somebody told me they saw a new video and I think it had been up a couple days and it had 13,000 views. So that one was going well. I've got to start writing down I never write down who I do interviews with. And so I never know, like I know a few of them that are out there, but I don't know all of them. Um, he was an only child, a miracle. God bless you, Isaac. Yes, yes. God bless Isaac, his mom. I love you dearly, Penny, and this wonderful family. We love you, and I'm so glad we can be here for each other because life's hard. Whew, life is hard. It really throws some stuff at us, and I hope the children's books are encouraging to you. Um, I really, we may not do the Harbinger. We may just talk to David and do that talk on that. I think 3rd, 26th, whichever one of those is a Friday night this month. It is the 23rd. So yeah, he's going to come on the 23rd and we'll do that show. Tracy Beans has agreed to come on and do a Friday night with me. So that'll be fun. There are some other things as those get more solid. I'll let you know about those. Lisa. Hi, Lisa. I always look forward to your lives. Well, good. I'm glad. I've got the giving tree. I don't want to read it next though. So I'm going to look at the book idea that Debbie sent me. If you guys have any beloved children's books on this one, but like if there's 10 voices, I do think we're going to, because that's just got so much that we can talk about in it, and it's kind of funny. I like a good funny kids book, but we'll do that. We're going to do Horton Hears a Who. I'm not sure what order. Um, of those, and like I said, if you've got my email and my website are all in the description. If you want to donate and help support the costs of running the show, that would be wonderful and much appreciated. I've got some people that just donate $5 a month. And like I said, if I think we've got 2,000 subscribers, if 2,000 people did that, it would be life-changing for us. And Don could start coming on the show and this could be our job, which we would really love. We're at 1,970 followers. That's awesome. Hold on, I missed a comment there. Thorntree Meadows. Text that. I'll lose this chat when we're done. Maybe too long and hard to find. Written in the 1950s. Okay, I'll just now see. Now I want to find it. A Kindle or something. We'll look and see what we can find. Isaac's mom. One last word. If felt, I am just enduring. I've felt I'm just enduring every day. Oh, great hope as the Lord has blessed me. I praise God with all my heart. I'm sure you do feel like you're enduring. That's tough. I cannot, when we lost my nephew, it was really hard. He was just 7. And we had to discontinue life support. So that was really tough. And that was the most brutal emotional thing aside from my divorce that I went through. I cannot imagine it being one of my kids. And so we definitely feel for you in that. And like I said, just know that, he's as close as your next breath. He's not gone. The geography just stinks. And this life is over. Once you get out of your body, you realize how fast this went. And I know that doesn't help a whole lot while you're on this side, but any little assurance, and know that we've just been blessed, by you being here, and that you bring Isaac's spirit with you every time you come. And that's just meaningful to us. So, you reach out if you need anything. Like I said, my email and my website are both in the description. All the donation information is. That's all I've got. If you've got an idea for a children's book, email it to me so I can pre-screen those and start getting them in order. And that's all I can think of. No, it does. Your words mean so very. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Britt, you're definitely on the list of people I pray for. Of people I'm praying for. Debbie, how is John's foot? John hurt his foot or his leg, and I couldn't remember which it was. So I've been praying for both of his lower limbs because I couldn't remember what you told me. But I know he was struggling with that. And that's something that Don and I have been praying about. I've got quite a list. So you guys, if I've been praying, make sure to let me know if something breaks or resolves, because I like to write on the prayer list what the answer to that prayer was. Back later, and you feel like I'm waiting forever for an answer to prayer, and I can go through that list and say, wow, look, God met this need and this and this and this. Leg is pretty much healed, but still painful at times. Maybe try the some red light therapy, that Ruby Lux. It's called a Ruby Lux red light. It's like $30. You can get it on Amazon. And it's really good for pain, reduce inflammation, reducing nerve pain, helping muscles heal. Somebody on the live stream asked me about vitiligo, where you start losing the color of your skin. And I don't think, and I didn't have much to offer because we'd always been taught there was really nothing you could do about it. Well, I did a deep dive on it and I found a ton of information. So I'm going to bring some of that on Friday. And what else? There's some other things we're going to talk about on Friday. Let me look. I'll give you guys a quick preview. I've had a lot of people reaching out to me on the COVID protocol for people who have lost their sense of smell and taste. And so I'm going to try to get that up on my website today. It's just 3 things. It's the cinnamon Lavoris mouthwash, gargled 3 times a day, super hard. For rest, 10 seconds rest, 10 seconds rest, 2 to 3 times a day. That stimulates the vagus nerve at the back of the throat. Then the integrative therapeutics activity complex once a day. B vitamins help regenerate nerve tissue. And then the last one was the stabilized R-alpha lipoic acid, 600 milligrams once a day. That also helps with nerve regeneration, nerve growth. Those are both, if you've got MS or Parkinson's, that's a great supplement to take. But anyway, I'm going to try to get that one up on my website. I've got to get with my web lady to do that. And I was going to give you a quick preview on Friday. we're going to talk about the CDC, not the FDA, the CDC being in bed with Big Pharma. Replacing carbohydrates and protein. Replacing carbohydrates with protein is associated with reduced mortality risk in adults with chronic kidney disease, which was really interesting because generally in adults with kidney disease, we recommend, or doctors recommend, that you limit protein. So I was really interested to see that one. That turns what we used to think about kidney disease completely on its head. We're going to talk about how obesity impairs the brain response to nutrients, how we are not replacing our population. The U.S. births in 2022 did not rebound after COVID, and what that's going to cause, what kind of issues that's going to cause going forward. I think that's about all I've got right now. I'll be adding stuff. Of course, we'll talk about the Trump indictment, all that kind of stuff. But that's what I've got so far. Who knows what'll happen between Friday? Generally, I've never seen the news so busy in my life. I'll check into the red light treatment online. I need that list. You need the list for the prayer list. Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I could email you that. Oh, uh, so therapy came out this week. Today's Tuesday? Therapy came out last week, Friday, and he's thinking that he'll discharge me from therapy. I see the doctor, I see the specialist again, I think on the 22nd, something like that. I'm noticing the further out I get from the steroids, the more pain. I'm going back to kind of that previous level of pain. What's happening is you have a bicep tendon that runs from the bicep up, and there's a groove that this bicep tendon sits in. And my bicep tendon keeps snapping out of that groove. And that's, if it's snapped out of the groove, I can't raise my arm. It's really sore, as you can see. And it'll start, if you can hear that. Turn the mic up. Ready? I don't know if you can hear that. But anyway, that's the bicep tendon snapping around in that groove. So I'm going to talk to him about if there's anything we can do at this state. It was worse than it was before surgery. Now it's the same as it was before surgery. So I've not seen any benefit from the surgery. So I'm going to talk to him about that nerve, if there's some kind of something I could wear that would stabilize it, specific interventions to help that bicep tendon stay where it's supposed to stay, because it's really problematic. Updates on your shoulder too. Oh, the nerve thing. Okay, yes, I will. Yeah, I can send you that list, and actually, I can. I'll drop it in the main comment section when I'm done. All right, let me pray us out. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and for Rumble and YouTube and Facebook family that come and join us for this book club time every week. And Father, I just pray that you would help us take the lessons from the Velveteen Rabbit and just stew on those in our brain, and that your Holy Spirit would speak the story, and that you would help us to be more authentic and more real, even when it hurts. And that you would help us to know that we need to not just be going through the motions and that we need to really be 100% engaged and open to the idea that there's going to be some hurt with that, but with that hurt comes incredible growth. Father, I would just pray for anybody who's struggling physically, emotionally, spiritually. Pray for Isaac's mom, certainly, as that grief of losing a child never goes away. Father, I pray that you would bring happy memories of Isaac to her mind, and that you would bring more people into her life that feel comfortable talking about Isaac, and that you would help her feel comfortable bringing him up to close friends, and that would be something, she could miss about Isaac, and that he was here with us. And I just thank you for her presence in this group, because I know it's hard, probably especially hard to listen to children's book having lost your child. I thank you for everybody that's here, for the people who aren't here, um, people that I've been kind of about. Father, just help me to reach out to them and know what to say, and make sure that they're okay, and let them, remind them that they're loved and missed. I just thank you for this time. I thank you for everybody here. I thank you for everybody's for me and this show. That just means the world to me. And I do feel that support and that love. I really do. And I thank you for that. Thank you for giving me people to walk alongside me in life, and for us all to work together to make things better. Um, Thank you for everybody that is a financial donor, Father. I pray that you would return that blessing to them tenfold, pressed down, shaken together, running over, with blessings, for their willingness and their sacrifice of blessing me. And just help me to always be mindful of how much of a sacrifice it is in these financial times that people do give. It just means the world to me. Thank you for blessing me in that way through these people. Father, we will close this out, and I just thank you. I thank you most of all for your son Jesus and his sacrifice to give us all eternal life. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, guys. Prayer list would be good too. Yeah, I need to find a place, because where people have expressed, what I would have to do is parse out, because on the list I don't identify whether this was a prayer request that was sent to me privately, or whether it was in the, because I have no idea where I got that information, um, for my failure to track it. But the other thing on the nerves, I can definitely put that up on my website for you, and I can send it to you, Debbie, because I have your text, uh, your phone number. Guys, I will see you Friday night at 8:30 for the Friday night live stream, and then we'll be back here Tuesday morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern to read our next book. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If there are weird technical issues, that you noticed that have been different than before, or if you thought it was smoother, um, send me some feedback on that, or leave a comment on the feedback in the comment section. 'Cause I'm really on this new software, and I want to make sure that it's enjoyable for you guys as it is for me, and that it's adding to the show. I will see you guys soon. Um, I love you, whole big bunches out.